Good morning, aspirants. My name is Roopam Jha, Senior Mentor at Prepp IAS. Today is 8th of August, and I welcome you all on a series on what to read in the Hindu newspaper. While going through the articles in today's edition of Hindu newspaper, we will not only see it from the perspective of prelims and mains, but also try to interlinking it with other GS papers as well. So let's get started. The very first article that is worth getting our attention is Modi vows to protect farmers amid FTA negotiations with USA. Now, this particular article is relevance for GS paper 2, that is governance, WTO, international relations, and GS paper 3, agriculture and economy. The theme that is being discussed in this particular article is talks about FTA versus agricultural sovereignty. Now, if I have to tell you the in two lines what this article talks about, this is related to PM saying we will not be compromising on farmer interest amid ongoing FTAs with USA. So the immediately next question should click on to you why agriculture, dairy sector are so sensitive when it comes to any trade talk that we do with foreign nations. For prelims perspective, this particular article is to be seen for areas such as what is FTA, what is India trade dynamics as of now, India USA trade dynamics, what are the agricultural imports that we do, what is our share of agricultural export to the world and to USA. For mains perspective, the angles that we have to dig deep while reading this particular article is FTA and farmer protection, conflict and coexistence that happens. Afterwards, reforms in agriculture that is needed. Agricultural trade policy, if we have made any. We can link it with GS paper 3 as well. Trade, then also GS paper 2, bilateral relationship with USA. In this manner, this particular article is to be seen trying to develop multi-dimensional angle from this particular article and knowing a little bit of every aspects that one should go through. Afterwards, the next important article that's worth our attention in today's Hindu newspaper is on editorials page that talks about World Court Advisory's opinion boost climate action. So if I have to tell you in two lines what this article talks about is recently International Court of Justice issued a landmark advisory statement that holds states accountable for climate inaction. This is the key context for this particular article. But for UPSC angle, we have to see it through different aspects. The very first one, theme. If we are reading this particular article, what is the key theme here? Key theme that talks about legal obligation of state under climate change, and it talks. Afterwards, the relevance for which all paper this particular article holds. Firstly, GS paper 2, international institution. GS paper 3, environment. We can even link it with GS paper 4 as well, environmental ethics. Right. Now, while going through this particular article, what are the areas for prelims perspective that we need to know? The very first one, ICJ, International Court of Justice, its function, and whether the judgment that it says is binding or advisory in nature. If advisory is in nature, do we have to comply it or not? In this article, a very notable example that has been discussed over here in case of Chagos Island. Try looking at geographically where these Chagos Island are located, and when they asked UK to hand over to Mauritius these Chagos Island, did they comply with it or not? And also try to understand, hence, the judgments that they make are whether they are advisory and compliance with it is mandatory or not. For mains perspective, the same article is to be seen for role of international law in enforcing climate obligation. global south and the debate that we see, global south versus global north, and climate justice that the south are asking for developed nations, emission targets, NDC's targets. Afterwards, if a country, for instance, the case in point is USA, when they step out of any climate obligation, as has been seen in the case of Paris, a climate deal, whether these sort of judgment made by ICJ is are they liable to enforce it or not? So these are the angles that has been discussed in this particular article, and how we have to see for the relevance of our exams. I just discussed it with all of you. Moving on, the next important article that is to be seen from today's newspaper is Mending Ties. This particular article talks about India-Philippines relationship. In just two lines, if I have to give you the crisp of this particular article, what it talks about: Philippines signs strategic pact with India, joint drills in South China Sea. Then, for prelims particularly, this particular article is relevant, and the areas that we have to read and brush up our knowledge on: UN Clause Award of 2016, South China Sea geography, then BrahMos export that we are doing. For mains perspective, the same article is to be seen from the lens of Indo-Pacific diplomacy, relevance of India's presence in Indo-Pacific, and also Quad, how the security is to be maintained, arms export as foreign policy tool. Afterwards, this article talks about the for the very first time, India and Philippines did joint maritime drill. Then afterwards, West Philippine Sea and its location, the confrontation that is going on with China on certain areas, whether India supported Philippines or not. So these are the ways that we have to keep in mind. Also, Philippines signed its strategic partner relation with India only after other nations that it has already signed with is Japan, Vietnam, Australia, and Korea. So, in this manner, signing this agreement, how they see India as a key partner. And talking about the arm export, BrahMos, Philippines is the first nation that we have signed with and exported the missile system. So this is how this particular article is to be seen for today's edition of Hindu newspaper. Moving on, the next very important article that talks about is Indian economy perfectly balanced? This particular article talks about the overall health of Indian economy. In two lines, if I have to give you the crisp of what this particular article talks about, India's growth story is hailed, but there are also issues with it. For example, in the form of real wages, inflation that we are saying, the disproportionate wealth distribution that India's economy is facing. Right. So this is the key theme that has been discussed with a lot of stats and datas proving some of the points in for, while other points in the against. So this is relevant for GS paper 3, economy, growth and employment. For prelims perspective, the areas that we have to know, the very first term is Goldilocks economy. What is it? And we need to know the difference between real wages versus nominal wage, labor force data. Afterwards, other terms that we need to have clarity upon is consumer price index. What is it? Afterwards, consumer food price index. What is it? Then we need to know the difference between headline CPI inflation. Afterwards, core inflation and headline inflation. Then other areas that we have to keep in mind is what is Gini coefficient. Then text to GDP data that we have. Afterwards, one argument that has been posted over here: the number of billionaires in India has surged while real wages for many has stagnated. Debt to GDP ratio. Then another angle that we have to keep in mind about the so-called macro sweet spot that we are vouching for, that gives an impression of India as a shining star nowadays in Global Economic Forum, whether the narrative is correct or not. Purchasing power parity, all these angles are being discussed in this particular article, and we have to see these terminologies with knowing the clarity on each of these terms that holds relevance for prelims. Moving on, the very first question that any aspirant can strike while reading this particular article is India's growth story is inclusive in nature or not? What are the challenges of jobless or unequal growth that we are facing? So these angles that can be seen from this particular article and can be, read upon. Afterwards, the next important article that holds our attention in today's edition of Hindu newspaper is Supreme Court poser to ED over poor conviction rate. Now, this talks about the key theme in just two lines. If I have to explain you, there is a lot of concern from Supreme Court on ED's low conviction rate, despite high arrest and custodial figures that they claim. From prelims perspective, the articles or the pointers that we have to read is what are PMLA provisions, role of ED, under which ministry it falls on, whether that's a constitutional body or statutory body. Just these pointers. For mains, what is the need for police reforms? Investigative versus judicial balance that we are required to read. Then other GS papers that it can be linked with ethics. Then criminal justice system. What are the issues that is being faced in Indian criminal justice system? So this is how it is to be seen from this particular article. Moving on, the next important article that is worth our attention is judicial independence. Allahabad High Court urged Chief Justice not to follow Supreme Court's directive. So the two-liner context, if I have to give you about this particular article, it talks about is 13 High Court judges opposed Supreme Court order removing judge from criminal bench. Now, while reading this particular article, for prelims perspective, the areas that we should be having an glance upon is what is Article 50, Article 235, Article 214. Then afterwards, administrative power versus judicial power. For mains perspective, the areas that we have to keep in mind is Supreme Court's supervisory role, its limits and balance. Judicial independence versus judicial discipline. So in this manner, this particular article is to be seen while going through this article. Other areas that can be linked here is in paper ethics, integrity in judiciary, GS paper 2, separation of power, right? So moving on, the next important article that one should not miss is EC, Election Commission notifies Vice President elections on August 2. August 21 is the last date for this. Now, while going through this particular article, the two-liner context that I can give to you is there is a notification regarding Vice President polls post Dhankar's resignation. So this particular article is to be seen from the perspective of, prelims regarding election process. Firstly, election process of Vice President under Article 66. Then Electoral College, what it comprises of. Then whether the system is, what sort of voting pattern is being observed, whether it's proportionate voting system or not. Afterwards, we have to see how the nomination paper are being signed, how many members are required to sign it and other as a proposers, then whether whip is applied in the election of vice president or not. We can even link it with other GS papers in a manner, role of constitutional bodies. So this is how this particular article is to be seen. Moving on, the next important article that is worth our attention is how groundwater contamination is fueling uh, chronic illness. Now, if I have to talk about a two-liner context to this article is there has been an observation in 2024 Central Groundwater Report uh, Board that says 20% of the samples of groundwater is contaminated with several minerals. So this particular article talks about it. So this is relevant for GS paper 3. That is environment. Right. So the key theme that we can look into it is environmental health and chemical contamination. For prelims, the areas that we have to know is what is Central Groundwater Board, which act under which act this has been formed. Afterwards, there are several sort of pollution that has been discussed. So we need to know what mineral causes what sort of symptoms, and there in this article there could be a map of India wherein contamination of which mineral is affecting which region, what sort of symptoms are being seen. For example, there has been a lot of discussion on excessive fluoride. Right. So excessive fluoride here is being discussed. Afterwards, then there has been contamination with regard to nitrate, this fluoride region, arsenic fluoride, arsenic region. Then afterwards, nitrate contamination. What are the effects of it? Afterwards, uranium contamination that has been given. Other heavy minerals that affects the health of the Indians is lead, cadmium, chromium, mercury, etc. Then it's not only these minerals that affects, but also the leakage of septic tanks and sewage infiltration. If it happens, what sort of trigger system and what other aspects that is being leading to health issues. So this has been discussed so far. What are blue baby syndrome? What is 𝐻𝐻 syndromes? These are the things that is being discussed in this article, and we have to dig deep on. Moving on, the last important article for the day is understanding the prophylaxis, the gold standard treatment in hemophilia. So this particular article talks about understanding the hemophilia and its preventive actions. For prelims perspective, we need to know the what is hemophilia, whether it's a genetic disease or it happens with the help of mutation. Then the key themes in advances that we have made in treatment of rare disease management. For mains perspective, what are the challenges that one faces while managing rare disease policy, public health issue. So this is all for today's newspaper from my end. Till we meet for the next time, take care and goodbye.